Hey, what's up guys? Jake with Legacy 4x4 here again, and today we're going to do a simple video, but something that I thought would be of interest to a lot of people that follow this channel and possibly a whole lot of other people as well. We're going to be doing a little bit of rust repair on the sheet metal of my 1990 Ford Bronco. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so my Bronco is overall in very good condition. There's not very much rust on it whatsoever. However, there are two particularly bad spots of rust on the driver's side of it. One is right on the fender, and then right down at the bottom near the bumper there's another spot as well. These spots have gotten so bad that there are holes through the sheet metal, so it is noticeable. I'm about to paint the Bronco, but I want to get this rust repair out of the way first before I get into the painting process. So when I do the paint, I've got a nice smooth place to do all of this. Now, I am not a bodywork guy. I'm not the best at it. This is by all means an amateur attempt at doing some sheet metal repair work. Now, I've done stuff like this in the past. I understand the process of it, but just so you know, I'm not a professional, and this is also not going to be a professional job. But if you have an older truck and you're just trying to fix a couple of small little rust pinholes and things like that on, this is a way to do that by adding in some new metal and taking away some of that old rusted cancerous metal. When you do this, it might look a little intimidating because you do have to take away a lot of the previous metal, the original metal, because rust is cancerous and so it does spread. So even though you can't always see and it's not all the way through it in some places, you do want to go a little bit outside of the problem area so that you have a good bond to the rest of the truck and that you have a repair that is going to hold up to time. So anyways, with that said, to do this, I'm going to take you guys around to the other side of the truck. I'm going to show you guys the rust that we're working with, explain the basics of the process, and then we're going to knock out these two little rust holes. The other small stuff, like there's a couple pinholes and there's a big gash on the passenger side door, but those are not going to get fixed. There's a dent on the passenger side door. I'm not going to repair that probably. I don't see a reason to pull out all the dent. I don't want to take the interior door apart to try to pound the dent back out again. So I'm going to just leave it the way it is. It's fine. It's a Bronco. This thing's going to get used on the trail, so I'm not too worried about some small stuff. I just want to get the big rust stuff out of the way. So with that said, let's get started. Okay, so down here on the fender of the Bronco, you can see what we're working with. Up here is the worst of it on this outer fender rail right here. Now this is a really common place for any vehicle to rust. The Commando had a ton of rust in this area as well. Obviously on the Commando, I went the intense method and I just basically got rid of the entire rear quarter panel. I don't want to do this to this truck. I want this truck to stay mostly stock looking, so we're going to repair that. Now there's also a spot down here, a little rust hole down here that we're going to repair as well in preparation for paint. Now the general process is relatively simple. So what you're going to do is, if you've ever patched drywall before, it's very similar to patching drywall. You're just going to use steel in a welder instead of using drywall and plaster. So for this, I've got a piece of, I think this is 14 gauge or 16 gauge, one of the two, piece of scrap steel that I had. So I cut a little square out of this that is larger than this hole down here. So we're going to start with this flat hole because this is easier to do than the fender is. So what I did is I cut this down to size. I laid it up where I want it to go so that it covers the entire cancered area, and I drew a black line around it. Now that black line shows the outer ring of this piece of steel. Now ideally you want to cut this just a little bit on the inside so that you have just a little bit of excess. So you don't want this to sit behind it or fall through. It's going to make tacking it into place very challenging. So you want just a hair of excess so that when you place this down into place, it's got something to rest on so you can do your tack welds. The general process is that we're going to cut out this little square here. We're going to plop this into place and we're going to tack weld it in with the welder on a very low setting on the four corners. And then I'm going to have to do a little bend on the bottom of it to get it to wrap around properly to cover up the bottom part, which is also rusted out. And then after that, once it's tacked into place, you're going to confirm fitment and make sure it's about as flat as you can get it in the area. And you're going to basically just do tack welds all the way up and around it. You don't want to do a full bead on something like this because vehicles are generally made out of really thin sheet metal. This is probably 18 or 20 gauge, the skin of the Bronco is. So you don't want to do a full bead all the way around it because you're going to blow through it. Now if you blow through it, you're just going to have the same problem again. So you want to just do basically little tiny tacks, and if it starts to look like you're starting to blow through the steel, swap to the other side and do tacks along the other side. So I'll show you guys that process in greater detail and you'll have a better understanding of what I mean. So for now, I've got my steel already cut. I've got it lined up with an arrow so I know exactly how it goes on here. I'm going to grab my battery powered cutoff saw and I'm going to cut out this square here. So let me grab the saw and we'll do that part next. Okay, so when you do this, make sure you wear ear and eye protection, and if you're inside especially, and you should honestly do it outside as well, when you come to the point where you're grinding off of the paint, you're going to probably want to wear some kind of a mask or a respirator. I know they're uncomfortable, but you're going to want to wear something like that because you're going to be grinding through who knows how many layers of paint, primer, galvanization, etc., to get down to the bare metal, but you do have to get down to the bare metal to do this. So anyways, we got our plate all prepped. Let me grab the welder and drag it outside and we'll start tacking this into place. Okay, so when it comes to doing this, you're gonna probably want your welder down pretty low. Most welders can probably be as low as it can go, to be honest. I've got mine set to 22 gauge. Now granted, I know I'm working with like 14 or 16 gauge here, but the body is much thinner than that. So the body's probably closer to 22 gauge. I have found when I do this that I go even lower than that as well. So like my welder's got auto set, I put it down to 22 gauge, but you're probably gonna wanna run your welder about as low as it can possibly go. The reason for that is, especially old steel, old thin steel, you're gonna burn through this. So go low, you can do multiple passes if you have to. We're gonna tack this into place, weld it into place, grind it smooth, probably come back through and do another set of welds on it to fill up any of the gaps that the grinding produces. So anyways, we've got our steel here. I'm gonna line it up and start tacking this into place. Okay, so we actually got that panel done already. So it's pretty simple. As you just watched me do it in about 15 minutes, it is relatively simple. It does take a little bit of kind of like getting used to though, because it is a really delicate process to like just do those tiny little tacks along the thin sheet metal. So even I blew through that on a couple of places. Now I was able to fix it because they weren't very bad. So I was able to just do extra little dollops of weld on there, and that was able to solve the problem. But as you can see, that's what it looks like. Afterwards, you go through, use a flat disc, and you're going to want to smack down the welds and try to make this as flat as you can. Now, it's not going to be perfect, and accept that. It's not going to be perfect when you're done with this part of it. You want it to be close enough, because the truth is, once this part's done, then you need to go through and use Bondo to cover it. And I know Bondo gets a bad rap, yada yada yada. It's an important part of bodywork. So unless you wanted to strip this entire car down to bare metal, you're gonna have to do Bondo to match the two paint layers, because like I said, that paint layer is honestly thicker than the steel is. You're looking at like 1/8 of an inch at least of paint and primer and coatings and everything else on there. So you're gonna have to do Bondo to kind of smooth out that transition so this looks nice and smooth. But I'll bring the camera down here and you guys can see what this looks like on the truck now. Okay, so as you can see, like I said, it's not perfect. You can very clearly see the distinction between the paint, the other bodywork and Bondo that was on here, the primer, the galvanization, everything else, down to where I did the bare metal patch panel here. But it is relatively smooth as you look at it. There's a couple little hills from where the weld is where I didn't want to grind any farther, because if I ground any farther, it would have punched through and I would have to come back down here and re-weld again. So this is what you're looking at. This is the kind of a finished product that you're looking for on a project like this. Now, the next step is going to be to come through here with Bondo, flatten this out again, and make it even with the rest of the truck. That Bondo is also going to provide some water retention or some water prevention to keep this part from rusting again. But before I get to Bondo, I'm going to do that little panel. So let me get the parts together and let me start looking at this and see how we're going to do this part. Alright, so sorry if the glare is a little bad here. We are outside, but as you can see, the close-up here of what this looks like, sure, like I said, it is not a 100% perfect professional job, but by the time I get just one layer of Bondo on it and then all the other layers of paint on it, you're not going to be able to see some of those imperfections. This patch panel came out really well. These ones up here are just okay. These ones are a little harder because you got the concave here of the fender. It's a little harder to do. These are good enough. I'm going to probably do some fender well type stuff here, get some accent pieces to it, so I'm not too worried about those. Again, with a little Bondo though, and then all the layers of paint, you're not going to really be able to see a lot of the imperfections. So there's the rest of the Bronco. Next up, I've got to figure out how to get this to idle properly. It's not idling right now. So it's running, it's driving, you just got to give it gas. And say hi to Brittany. She was the assistant out here for the project today. All right, let's talk about what's next. Okay, so this is going to complete this video now. We got those rust holes all repaired, and now the Bronco is ready for paint. It's probably going to be a couple weeks before I get to the paint on the Bronco. It is on my docket of things to do. I've got the paint sitting on my other tool chest over there. I just don't think I have the time to get to it quite yet. So we'll do the Bronco's paint next, headlights, taillights, and front grille, and then we'll go through and build out the back of the Bronco. We're also going to be working on the Commando. We've got to get the Commando to shift properly. The clutch isn't engaging right, so I got to troubleshoot the Commando a little bit. And then I've got my new F350, which is sitting in my driveway. And I've got a handful of airbags and some other random stuff I've got to install on that. So I've got a running list of projects I've got to do. So stay tuned for all of those. I hope you guys like this video. Overall, not too complicated of a project though. So nice and easy. It fixes, at least for the most part, the really glaringly bad rust holes that we had on the Bronco. So we got that all done, and now we can move on to doing some other things. In addition, I've also got some go-karts that I gotta start building at some point. So we've got quite a few projects coming up here over the summer while we're working on stuff before I get to the point where I'm getting these trucks ready to go out and using these trucks for their intended purposes. Anyways, I hope you guys like this video. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I will catch y'all on the next one.